The blood on Catherine Ashford's hands had frozen into dark crimson flakes by the time she stumbled through the heavy wooden door of the general store in Cannon City, Colorado, her breath coming in ragged gasps that turned to white mist in the December air of 1878. She had killed a man 3 hours ago, though calling Jacob Murdoch, a man felt too generous for someone who had murdered her father in cold blood and tried to claim her family's ranch through forged documents and intimidation. The moment his hand had reached for his gun, something inside Catherine had snapped. Her father's old revolver, the one she had grabbed from the desk drawer, had felt impossibly heavy in her shaking hands until the moment she pulled the trigger. Then it had felt like justice. Now, standing in the dim warmth of the store with sawdust clinging to her wet boots, it felt like a noose tightening around her neck. "Help you, miss." The shopkeeper's voice seemed to come from very far away. Catherine forced herself to focus. "I need supplies. Food, blankets, ammunition." Her voice sounded steadier than she felt. "Quickly, please." The man's eyes narrowed as he took in her appearance. Her dark blonde hair had come loose from its pins, her dress was torn at the hem, and despite her attempts to wipe her hands clean on her skirts during the frantic ride into town, she knew she looked wild, desperate, guilty. "That will be $7, he said, piling her requested items on the counter with careful precision. She counted out the coins with trembling fingers, knowing this was nearly all the money she had left in the world. The ranch, her father's pride, would go to Jacob's brother now. The law would not see her actions as self-defense. Women did not shoot men, no matter the provocation, and expect to walk free. Especially not when those men had connections to the territorial judge. The snow had started falling as she loaded her supplies onto her father's horse, Thunder, a strong roan gelding who had carried her father through countless Colorado winters. The flakes were large and wet, the kind that would accumulate quickly. Good. Snow would cover her tracks as she fled, give her a few hours head start before Jacob's brother Samuel gathered a posse. She needed to reach the mountain passes before they closed for winter, needed to disappear into the wilderness where the law could not follow. Catherine rode hard out of Cannon City, heading west toward the towering peaks of the Sangre de Cristo Mountains. The wind picked up as darkness fell, driving the snow sideways until she could barely see Thunder's ears in front of her. Her fingers grew numb inside her gloves, her face stinging with cold, but she pressed on. Behind her, she knew, Samuel Murdoch would be discovering his brother's body. Behind her, the life she had known for 22 years was ending. The snow fell heavier now, thick and relentless, transforming the familiar landscape into an alien world of white. Catherine had grown up in these mountains, had learned to ride and shoot alongside her father, but she had never been out in a storm like this, had never pushed this far into the high country alone in winter. The temperature was dropping fast. She needed shelter soon, or she would freeze to death long before any posse caught up with her. Thunder stumbled on the steep trail, nearly throwing her, and Catherine made a decision. There was an old line shack somewhere near here, a shelter her father had pointed out years ago during a summer ride. If she could find it in this blizzard, she might survive the night. She turned Thunder off the main trail, trusting her memory and the horse's instincts to guide them. 15 minutes later, or maybe it was an hour, time seemed to lose meaning in the whiteout conditions. A dark shape materialized through the snow. The line shack, small and weathered but still standing. Catherine practically fell from the saddle, her legs barely holding her weight. She led Thunder to the lean-to attached to the side of the shack, rubbing him down with shaking hands and covering him with both blankets she had brought, knowing the horse's survival was as critical as her own. Inside the shack, she found old wood stacked against one wall, dry enough to burn. Her fingers were so cold she could barely strike the match, but finally, a small fire caught in the stone fireplace. Catherine huddled close to the flames, feeling the painful tingling as circulation returned to her extremities. She should eat something, should plan her next move, but exhaustion overwhelmed her. She wrapped herself in her coat and curled up on the wooden floor near the fire, her father's revolver clutched in one hand. Sleep came in fitful waves, filled with dreams of her father's face when he realized Jacob had come to kill him, of the kick of the gun in her hands, of blood spreading across the wooden floor of their ranch house. She woke to the sound of wind howling around the shack and fresh snow blowing through gaps in the walls. The fire had burned low. Catherine fed it more wood and checked on Thunder, who stood with his head down, conserving energy. Dawn brought no break in the storm. If anything, the snow fell even harder. Catherine ate some of the dried beef and hardtack she had purchased, rationing carefully. She had enough food for perhaps a week if she was careful. After that, she would need to hunt or find a town, and either option meant risk. Risk of being caught, of Samuel Murdoch's justice, which would be swift and brutal. She was checking the shack's walls for gaps she could plug when she heard it. The sound was faint under the wind's roar, but unmistakable. Hoofbeats. Someone was coming up the trail. Catherine's heart hammered against her ribs. She grabbed her revolver, checked that it was loaded, and positioned herself near the window, peering out through the frost-covered glass. Through the driving snow, she could make out a single rider on a dark horse, moving slowly but deliberately up the mountain. Not a posse, then. One man tracking her alone, foolish or dangerous, possibly both. The rider came closer, and Catherine got her first clear look at him. He was tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a heavy coat and a wide-brimmed hat pulled low against the snow. Ice had formed in his dark beard. He rode like someone born in the saddle, comfortable and easy despite the brutal conditions, and he was looking directly at the shack. Catherine stepped back from the window, her mind racing. She could shoot him, add another body to her conscience. She could hide, hope he passed by, though that seemed unlikely given he was staring right at her shelter. Or she could wait, see what he wanted, and shoot him if necessary. The decision was made for her when the man dismounted and knocked on the door. Actually knocked, like a gentleman caller, not breaking it down like she expected. "Miss Ashford." His voice was deep, rough from cold. "My name is Kellan Quinn. I am not here to hurt you. I am not with Samuel Murdoch's men, but you cannot stay here. They are coming, and they will find you within a day, storm or no storm." Catherine pressed herself against the wall beside the door, gun raised. "How do you know my name? Why should I trust anything you say?" "Because if I wanted to turn you in, I would have brought the posse with me instead of riding ahead alone." There was a pause. "And because your father once saved my life and I owe him a debt. Please, Miss Ashford, we are wasting time, and time is the one thing you do not have." Her father. Catherine felt something crack inside her chest. "You knew my father, Tom Ashford?" "Yes, madam. 3 years ago, I was working a cattle drive that got caught in a flash flood near your ranch. Your father pulled me from the water when I got swept off my horse, gave me a place to recover for a week. I heard what happened with Jacob Murdoch. I heard what you did." Another pause. "I also know what Jacob did first, what he did to your father." Catherine's hand was shaking again, but not from cold. "Then you know I had no choice." "I know, but the law does not care about that. Samuel Murdoch has money and influence. You are a woman who killed a man. They will hang you, Miss Ashford, and they will call it justice." The door handle rattled slightly. "Please, let me help you. Let me keep you safe." Something in his voice, a raw honesty that cut through her fear, made Catherine reach for the door. She opened it a crack, gun still raised, and found herself looking into the most striking blue eyes she had ever seen. They were the color of high mountain sky, bright and clear despite the storm raging around them, set in a face weathered by sun and wind and hard living. Kellan Quinn was perhaps 30 years old, with the kind of solid, capable presence that came from a life spent outdoors, working with his hands and his strength. "I could shoot you where you stand," Catherine said, though her voice lacked conviction. "You could." He did not flinch, did not look away. "But you would be condemning yourself to death out here alone. I know these mountains, Miss Ashford. I know trails the posse will not think to search. I know people who will shelter you, ask no questions. I can get you to Wyoming territory, maybe even Montana if necessary. Somewhere you can start over, use a new name." His eyes remained steady on hers. "Or you can shoot me and take your chances alone in this storm with armed men hunting you. Your choice." Catherine studied him for a long moment. She had learned to read men growing up, had learned which cowboys were honest and which would steal from your barn the moment your back was turned. Kellan Quinn's face was hard but not cruel, determined but not ruthless, and he had known her father. She lowered the gun. Kellan's shoulders relaxed slightly, though his expression remained serious. "Thank you. Now we need to move fast. The storm will cover our tracks for a while, but Samuel has already hired a tracker, a Ute man named Red Sky who can follow sign even other trackers miss. Our best chance is to head north through the pass, then cut west before we reach the main trail. There is a canyon route most people do not know about." "I need to get Thunder ready," Catherine said, already moving toward the lean-to. "Your horse is exhausted. I can see that from here." Kellan followed her, his own horse, a sturdy bay, standing patient in the snow. "We will need to move slower than I would like. Give him time to recover as we ride. That means we stay off the main trails completely, take the hard routes where they cannot follow easily." Together they prepared the horses, working in efficient silence. Catherine found herself hyper-aware of Kellan's presence, the way he moved with quiet competence, checking her saddle rigging without being asked, making sure her supplies were properly secured. When his hand accidentally brushed hers while adjusting Thunder's bridle, she felt an unexpected jolt of something that was not quite fear. They mounted and headed north into the teeth of the storm. The snow was so thick Catherine could barely see Kellan's back ahead of her, but he seemed to navigate by instinct, never hesitating at trail junctions, never showing doubt. Hours passed in frozen misery. Catherine's face went numb, her hands locked on the reins. Behind them, their tracks filled with snow almost as fast as they made them. By nightfall they had climbed into a narrow canyon Kellan seemed to know intimately. He led them to a shallow cave, barely deep enough for the horses but sheltered from the wind. They made camp in silence, both too cold and exhausted for conversation. Kellan built a small fire using wood he had brought in his saddle bags and shared his rations with her, dried venison and some kind of dense bread that tasted better than anything Catherine could remember eating. "Get some rest," he said quietly. "I will keep watch for a few hours, then wake you for your turn." "You do not have to do this," Catherine said, the words coming out before she could stop them. "Risk yourself for me. You do not even know me." Kellan looked at her across the fire, his face half in shadow. "I know you loved your father. I know you defended yourself against a man who would have killed you just as he killed Tom. That is enough." He paused. "And I told you I would keep you safe. I do not make promises lightly, Miss Ashford." "Catherine," she said, "if we are going to be traveling together, you should call me Catherine." Something shifted in his expression, a softening around his eyes. "Catherine, get some sleep. Tomorrow will be harder than today." He was right. The next day brought clear skies but brutal cold, the kind that made breathing painful and turned exposed skin white with frostbite in minutes. They rode through landscapes of impossible beauty, mountains gleaming white against blue sky, forests silent under blankets of snow. But Catherine was too cold and too scared to appreciate it. Every time they crested a ridge, she expected to see riders behind them. Every time Thunder stumbled, she imagined being thrown, injured, captured. Kellan kept them moving steadily north and west, always choosing difficult terrain, routes that required dismounting and leading the horses through narrow defiles or down steep slopes. It was exhausting work, but Catherine understood the strategy. Samuel's men would stick to established trails where they could move faster. Only a tracker like Red Sky would attempt to follow them through this wilderness, and even he would be slowed by the conditions. On the third day, they descended from the high country into a valley where the snow was lighter and the temperature slightly less murderous. Catherine's guard was finally beginning to lower, her terror slowly replaced by bone-deep weariness when Kellan suddenly held up his hand, signaling her to stop. "What is it?" she whispered. He pointed down the trail ahead. Catherine squinted, then saw it. Smoke rising from a campfire, barely visible against the gray sky. People. And where there were people, there were questions. "We go around," Kellan said quietly. "Give them a wide berth. Could be trappers, could be drifters, could be anyone. We do not take chances." They backtracked and pushed into the forest, moving slowly through trees and brush. Catherine was focused on not making noise when Thunder suddenly threw his head up and whinnied. Before she could react, an answering whinny came from the camp they were trying to avoid. "Damn," Kellan said softly. He turned to Catherine, his expression grave. "Stay behind me. Let me do the talking. If anything goes wrong, you ride hard north. Do not look back." They had no choice but to continue forward now. Trying to run would only make them look guilty, suspicious. Kellan straightened in his saddle, his hand resting casually near his gun, and rode toward the camp as if he had always intended to pass through. 3 men sat around the fire, all armed, all watching them approach with the wariness of men who lived outside the law. Catherine's heart sank. Outlaws. This could go very wrong very quickly. "Afternoon," Kellan said, his voice easy and unconcerned. "Cold day for travel." The largest of the 3 men, a brute with a scar across his jaw, stood slowly. "That it is. What brings you folks through this country, heading to Wyoming?" "My wife and I are planning to start a ranch near Cheyenne." Kellan's lie came smoothly, naturally. His wife. Catherine tried to keep her expression neutral. "Figured we would beat the spring rush, get established before the thaw." The scarred man's eyes moved to Catherine, lingering in a way that made her skin crawl. "Pretty wife you got there. Seems like hard traveling for a woman. Most folks would wait until spring." "Most folks do not have the opportunity we have waiting," Kellan said. His tone remained pleasant, but Catherine noticed his posture had shifted, subtle but ready. "We appreciate the conversation, but we should keep moving. Want to make another 10 miles before dark." "Now hold on." Another man spoke up, younger with mean eyes. "We got coffee hot." Seems unfriendly to just ride through without sharing a cup. It was not a request. Catherine felt Thunder tense beneath her, picking up on her fear. Kellan must have felt the same shift in atmosphere because his hand moved fractionally closer to his gun. "We would not want to impose," Kellan said. "No imposition at all," the scarred man smiled, revealing missing teeth. "In fact, I insist." The situation was deteriorating fast. Catherine's mind raced, trying to think of something, anything that might help. Then she noticed the third man, who had not spoken, staring at her with an odd expression. Recognition. "You," he said slowly, standing. "You are that woman from Cannon City, The one who killed Jacob Murdoch. There are posters up, $500 reward. Catherine's blood turned to ice. The scarred man's smile widened into something predatory. $500. Well, now that changes things considerably. He took a step toward them. You will be coming with us, lady. And your friend there, well, he can ride on or he can die here. Makes no difference to me. Kellan's gun was in his hand before Catherine even saw him draw. Nobody is taking her anywhere. Back away from the horses. Now, the scarred man laughed. 3 against 1, friend. You cannot shoot all of us before one of us gets you. Maybe not. Kellan's voice had gone cold, hard as the frozen ground beneath them. But I guarantee I shoot you first, and I do not miss. Time seemed to suspend, crystallize like the ice on the trees around them. Catherine could hear her own heartbeat, loud in her ears. Her hand moved to her own gun, the weight of it familiar now in her palm. 3 men. Even if Kellan was as good as he seemed, the odds were terrible. Then thunder made the decision for her. The horse, sensing danger, reared suddenly, his hooves flashing out. The scarred man jumped back with a curse, and in that moment of distraction, Kellan fired. The shot echoed across the valley like thunder, and the man who had recognized Catherine fell clutching his shoulder. Ride, Kellan shouted. Catherine, ride now. She did not need to be told twice. Catherine drove her heels into Thunder's sides, and the horse leaped forward. Behind her, she heard more gunshots, shouts, chaos. Terror gave her strength, and she leaned low over Thunder's neck, branches whipping past her face as they crashed through the forest. Kellan's bay was right behind her. She could hear the hoofbeats, but she did not dare look back. They rode for what felt like hours but was probably only 20 minutes, pushing the horses hard until Kellan finally signaled her to slow. Catherine pulled Thunder up, gasping, and spun to look at Kellan. He was bleeding from a cut on his temple, blood running down the side of his face, but otherwise seemed intact. Are you hurt? His first words, not concerned for himself but for her. No, are you? Just a graze. One of them got a shot off. He dismounted, checking his horse carefully, then moved to Thunder. We need to keep moving. They might follow. You could have been killed. Catherine's voice shook. You should have let me go with them. $500. You could have taken the money yourself. Kellan looked up at her, and the intensity in his eyes made her breath catch. I told you I would keep you safe. I meant it. He held her gaze for a moment longer, then turned back to the horses. We are close to the territorial line. Once we cross into Wyoming, we will be harder to track. But we need to cover ground fast. They rode through the night, Kellan navigating by stars, keeping them moving north and west. Catherine found herself watching him as they traveled, this man who had appeared out of the storm, who had risked his life for her without question. She knew almost nothing about him beyond his name and the fact that her father had once saved him. She did not know where he came from, whether he had family, what kind of life he led. But she knew he was honorable in a way that had become rare in her experience. And she knew that something inside her responded to his presence in a way that had nothing to do with gratitude or necessity. Dawn found them in a grove of aspens, the white bark glowing in the early light. Kellan finally called a halt, and they made camp in a small clearing. Catherine's hands shook as she unsaddled Thunder, exhaustion and delayed shock catching up with her. She stumbled as she pulled the saddle free, would have fallen if Kellan had not caught her. Easy, he said softly, his hand steadying her shoulders. You are safe now, rest for a while. She looked up at him, and suddenly, without planning it, without thinking, she was crying. Great gasping sobs that she could not control, all the fear and grief and terror of the past days pouring out of her. Her father was dead. She had killed a man. She was being hunted like an animal. Everything she had known was gone. Kellan did not say anything. He just pulled her close, let her cry against his chest, one hand coming up to stroke her hair. He smelled like horse and leather and smoke, solid and real and alive. Catherine clung to him, this stranger who had become her only anchor in a world that had turned upside down. When the storm finally passed, when she had no more tears left, she pulled back, embarrassed. "I am sorry. I should not have. You have nothing to apologize for." Kellan's hand came up, gently brushing tears from her cheek. "You have been strong enough for too long. It is all right to break sometimes." His thumb traced along her cheekbone, and Catherine became suddenly, intensely aware of how close they were standing, of the warmth of his body, of the way he was looking at her. Not with pity or contempt, but with something that looked almost like wonder. "Catherine," he said quietly, and her name in his rough voice made something inside her chest flutter. Then he stepped back, breaking the moment, and Catherine felt both relieved and disappointed. This was not the time, not the place. They were still running, still in danger. Whatever this connection was between them, it would have to wait. They slept in shifts again, and when Catherine woke from her few hours of rest, she found Kellan sitting with his back against a tree, watching her. Not in a threatening way, but with an expression she could not quite read. "How long have you been awake?" she asked, sitting up and running her fingers through her tangled hair. "A while. I was thinking. About what happens next. We are maybe a day from crossing into Wyoming. Once we do, I know a town, a little place called Silver Creek. The sheriff there is an honest man, and he does not care much for Colorado politics. We can rest there for a few days, get you some proper supplies, maybe a change of clothes so you do not stand out." He paused. "After that, you will need to decide what you want to do, where you want to go." The words hung between them. Where did she want to go? Catherine realized she had not thought beyond immediate survival, had not considered what kind of life might await her beyond this flight. She could not go home. She could never go home. The ranch was lost, her father was gone. She was alone in the world with nothing but what she carried in her saddle bags. "I do not know," she admitted. "I have never been anywhere but Cannon City. I have no skills beyond running a ranch, no family left." She looked at Kellan. "What would you do if you were me?" He considered the question seriously. "I would head north, Montana Territory maybe. There is land opening up there, homestead opportunities. A woman alone would have difficulty, but if you were widowed, that would be different, respectable. You could file a claim, start over." "As a widow," Catherine said slowly, "with a dead husband that never existed. People reinvent themselves out here all the time. It is one of the few good things about the frontier. Nobody asks too many questions about who you were, only who you are now." It made sense. It was practical, logical. But the thought of continuing alone, of building a life by herself in some remote Montana valley, felt impossibly lonely. "Will you come with me?" The words were out before Catherine could stop them. "To Montana, I mean, or wherever I end up going. I know I have no right to ask, that you have done more than enough already, but I—" She stopped, not sure how to finish. Kellan was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was careful, measured. "Catherine, if I come with you, if we travel together much longer, people will talk. They will make assumptions. And given that you are supposed to be a respectable widow, having a man with you who is not your husband would raise exactly the kind of questions we want to avoid." The implications of his words settled over her. He was right, of course. A woman traveling alone with a man was scandalous, ruinous to her reputation. Even out here, especially out here where respectability was hard-won and easily lost, the appearance of impropriety could destroy whatever chance she had at a new life. "I understand," Catherine said, trying to keep the disappointment from her voice. "You have your own life to get back to. I have taken enough of your time." "That is not what I meant." Kellan leaned forward, his blue eyes intense. I meant that if we are going to travel together, if we are going to build new lives in Montana or anywhere else, we should do it properly. As husband and wife. In truth, not just pretense. Catherine's heart stopped. Are you asking me to marry you? I am suggesting it would be practical. For both of us. But there was something in his voice, beneath the practical words, that suggested his motivations were not entirely logical. You need protection, help establishing yourself. He paused, seemed to be choosing his words carefully. I have been alone for a long time. Moving from job to job, never settling anywhere. Maybe it is time I put down roots, and I cannot think of anyone I would rather do that with than you. It was the most unromantic proposal imaginable, phrased in terms of practicality and mutual benefit. But Catherine saw through it, saw the vulnerability in Kellan's eyes, the hope he was trying to hide. This hard, capable man who had risked everything to save her was offering her not just protection but partnership. A life together. We barely know each other, she said, though her heart was already answering yes. I know you are brave. I know you are loyal to those you love. I know you do not break easily, even when you have every right to. Kellan's voice softened. I know that when I look at you, I see someone worth fighting for, worth building a life with. That feels like enough to start with. Catherine's breath caught. This man, this unexpected savior, was offering her something she had thought lost forever. Not just survival, but hope. A future. Maybe even happiness. Yes, she said simply. Yes, I will marry you. Something blazed in Kellan's eyes, bright and fierce. He crossed the distance between them in 2 strides and took her hands in his grip warm and strong. I will be good to you, Catherine, I swear it. I will keep you safe and provide for you, and never give you cause to regret this choice. I know, she said, and realized she meant it. She trusted this man who had appeared out of the snow, trusted him in a way she had trusted few people in her life. Whatever happened next, they would face it together. They sealed the agreement with a kiss, tentative at first, then deeper as surprise gave way to something more. Catherine had been kissed before, awkward attempts by ranch hands and town boys, but nothing like this. Kellan kissed her like she was precious, like she was his whole world, and she felt something inside her that had been frozen since her father's death begin to thaw. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Kellan rested his forehead against hers. We should reach Silver Creek tomorrow. We can find a preacher there, do this properly. We should, Catherine agreed, though part of her felt they had just made a binding commitment more real than any ceremony could create. They rode out as the sun climbed higher, moving through country that gradually changed from mountain wilderness to rolling foothills. Kellan rode beside her now instead of ahead, and they talked as they traveled, sharing pieces of their lives. Catherine learned that Kellan had grown up in Missouri, that he had come west after the war, that he had worked as a cowboy, a trail guide, a ranch foreman, never staying anywhere long. He told her about seeing the elephant in distant countries before settling into the life he lived now, about friends he had lost and lessons he had learned. In turn, she told him about her childhood on the ranch, about her mother who had died when Catherine was 12, about her father who had been both parent and friend. She told him about the years of working alongside her father, learning everything he could teach her about horses and cattle and land. She told him about Jacob Murdoch's increasing harassment, the threats and intimidation, and finally about the day he had killed her father over a disputed water right. I did not plan to kill him, Catherine said quietly. When he came back that afternoon, I thought he just wanted to gloat. But then he pulled his gun, said he was going to finish what he started, make sure there were no Ashfords left to contest his claim. I grabbed my father's revolver from the desk. I do not even remember aiming. I just pulled the trigger." "You did what you had to do," Kellan said firmly. "Jacob Murdoch was a murdering thief. The world is better without him in it. The law does not see it that way. The law is not always right, and it is not always just." He reached across the space between their horses and took her hand. "You are not a murderer, Catherine. You are a survivor. Do not let anyone, including yourself, tell you different." His words, his absolute certainty, helped ease some of the guilt that had been eating at her. Maybe he was right. Maybe she had done what she needed to do to stay alive. That did not make it easy, did not erase the memory of Jacob falling, but it made it bearable. They crossed into Wyoming territory that evening, though there was no marker, no sign beyond Kellan's knowledge of the land. They camped that night in a copse of cottonwoods near a frozen stream, and Kellan shot a rabbit for their dinner. As they ate the roasted meat, sharing it in companionable silence, Catherine felt something shift inside her. For the first time since her father's death, she felt almost at peace. The danger was not past, might never truly be past, but for this moment, sitting beside a fire with this good man, she felt safe. After they ate, Kellan added wood to the fire and spread out both their bedrolls near the flames. "Sleep close tonight," he said, his tone practical. "Temperature is dropping. We will stay warmer together." It made sense, but Catherine's heart still raced as she lay down beside him. They were not married yet, not properly, and the intimacy of sharing warmth felt scandalous and thrilling all at once. But Kellan simply wrapped his arm around her, tucked her against his chest, and closed his eyes. Within minutes, his breathing had evened out into sleep. Catherine lay awake longer, hyper-aware of every point where their bodies touched, of the solid warmth of him, of the way his heartbeat seemed to echo through her own chest. This was her future, this man. In a day or two they would be married, would share not just warmth but a life, a bed, everything. The thought was terrifying and wonderful in equal measure. She must have eventually slept because she woke to dawn light and Kellan's voice, gentle in her ear. "Catherine, time to move." They rode into Silver Creek just after midday, a small town that clung to the side of a hill, its single main street lined with weathered buildings. It looked like a dozen other frontier towns Catherine had seen, rough and temporary, but Kellan assured her it was a good place, honest people trying to build something lasting. He led them to a small church at the end of the street, a simple wooden structure with a cross mounted above the door. Inside they found a preacher, an older man with kind eyes and weathered hands who introduced himself as Reverend Samuel Harrison. "We would like to be married," Kellan said simply. "Today, if possible." The Reverend studied them both, his gaze shrewd but not unkind. "You are both of age and willing." "Yes, sir," Catherine said. "And you understand that marriage is a sacred bond, not to be entered into lightly." "We do," Kellan said. His hand found Catherine's, gripped it firmly. "I intend to honor and cherish this woman for the rest of my life." Something in his voice, the absolute conviction, made the Reverend nod. "Very well. I will need 2 witnesses. Give me a moment to round up some folks." 10 minutes later, they stood before the simple altar with the Reverend and 2 townspeople who had been recruited off the street, a blacksmith and his wife who looked delighted to be part of a wedding. The ceremony was brief, the words familiar from other weddings Catherine had attended in Cannon City. But when Kellan repeated his vows, promising to love and protect her in sickness and health, in prosperity and hardship, she heard the truth in his voice and felt tears prick her eyes. Her own vows came out steady, strong. She promised to honor and stand beside him, to build a life with him, to face whatever came together. And she meant every word. When the Reverend pronounced them husband and wife, Kellan kissed her gently, sweetly, and Catherine felt the last pieces of her old life fall away. She was no longer Catherine Ashford of Cannon City, Colorado. She was Kellan Quinn, wife of Kellan Quinn, beginning a new life in a new land. The blacksmith, a jovial man named George, insisted on buying them dinner at the town's only restaurant, and they sat around a table with him and his wife Martha, eating stew and fresh bread while the couple regaled them with stories about Silver Creek. It felt strange and wonderful to sit there as a married woman, Kellan's hand resting on hers on the table, casual and possessive and right. That night, Kellan rented them a room at the boarding house, and Catherine felt her nerves return as they climbed the stairs. This was her wedding night. She was married to a man she had known for less than a week, and in a few minutes, they would be alone in a room with a bed, with expectations and intimacy she was not sure she was ready for. Kellan must have sensed her tension because once the door closed behind them, he turned to her with gentle eyes. "Catherine, we do not have to do anything you are not ready for. I know this has all happened fast. We can take our time, get to know each other properly." His consideration, his respect, made Catherine love him a little in that moment. But she also knew that waiting would only make her more nervous, would turn this into something bigger and more frightening than it needed to be. "I want this," she said quietly. "I want to truly be your wife." "I am just nervous." Kellan crossed to her, cupped her face in his hands. "So am I," he admitted. "You are the most remarkable woman I have ever met, and I am terrified of disappointing you." The confession, so honest and vulnerable, made Catherine laugh softly. "I think we are both worrying too much." She reached up, covered his hands with her own. "We will figure it out together, just like everything else." He kissed her then, deep and sweet, and Catherine let herself sink into it, let herself stop thinking and just feel. His hands were gentle as they found the buttons of her dress, patient as he helped her out of the layers of fabric. She returned the favor, unlacing his shirt with shaking fingers, revealing the hard muscles beneath, the scars of a life lived outdoors and dangerously. What followed was awkward and tender, and nothing like the crude jokes she had overheard from ranch hands. Kellan took his time, made sure she was comfortable, whispered reassurances when she tensed. And when they finally came together, when they became truly husband and wife, Catherine felt something shift into place, like a puzzle piece finding its proper spot. This was right. This man, this moment, this new beginning. Afterward, they lay tangled together in the narrow bed, Kellan's arm around her, her head on his chest. "Thank you," she whispered. "For what? For being patient, for being kind, for being you." He pressed a kiss to the top of her head. "Thank you for saying yes, for trusting me, for giving us a chance." They fell asleep like that, wrapped around each other, two people who had been strangers a week ago and were now bound together for life. The next days in Silver Creek passed in a blur of domesticity and planning. Kellan bought supplies for their journey north, sturdy winter gear and preserved food that would last through the mountains. Catherine bought fabric and sewing supplies, planning to make new clothes once they settled. They were careful with their money, knowing it had to last until they could establish a homestead and bring in income. The sheriff, a laconic man named Tom Brennan, gave them no trouble. If he had heard about the incident in Cannon City, he gave no sign. Kellan had been right. Out here, people cared more about who you were now than who you had been. On their fourth night in Silver Creek, as they were preparing to leave the next morning, a stranger rode into town. Catherine saw him from the window of their boarding house room, a lean man on a spotted horse, moving with the easy grace of someone who spent more time outdoors than in. Something about him made her nervous. "Kellan," she said quietly, "there is someone new in town." He came to the window, looked out, and went very still. "Damn. What? Who is he?" "That is Red Sky. The tracker Samuel Murdoch hired. Kellan's jaw tightened. He found us, I do not know how, but he found us. Catherine's blood ran cold. What do? We leave now tonight. Kellan was already moving, grabbing their belongings, shoving them into saddle bags. If we are lucky, he has not confirmed we are here yet. He might be checking towns along the border, but we cannot take the chance. They slipped out the back of the boarding house 20 minutes later, moving quietly through the darkness. Kellan led them to the stable where Thunder and his bay, whom Catherine had learned was named Ash, were kept. They saddled the horses by feel, not daring to light a lamp. They were leading the horses out when a voice spoke from the shadows. Going somewhere, Catherine spun, her hand going to her gun. Red Sky stood in the stable doorway, backlit by moonlight. He was younger than she expected, maybe 25, with long dark hair and intelligent eyes that missed nothing. "We do not want trouble," Kellan said, his voice even. "Nor do I." Red Sky held up his hands, showing they were empty. "I am not here to stop you." "Then why are you here?" "Because Samuel Murdoch paid me to find you, and I have. I am very good at what I do." He paused. "But being good at tracking does not mean I agree with everything I am asked to track. I heard what happened in Cannon City. I heard what Jacob Murdoch did to Tom Ashford. And I heard what Samuel is planning to do to the woman who killed his brother." "So what do you want?" Catherine asked, finding her voice. Red Sky looked at her directly. "I want you to know that I will tell Samuel I lost your trail at the border. That the snow and the terrain made tracking impossible. It will cost me my reputation if anyone learns the truth, but I will not be responsible for handing a woman over to be hanged for defending herself." He shifted his gaze back to Kellan. "You have maybe a day before Samuel realizes I failed and sends others. Use it well. Head northwest toward the Big Horn Mountains. There are places there a person could disappear forever if they wanted to." Before either of them could respond, he melted back into the shadows, gone as silently as he had arrived. Catherine stared at the empty doorway, her heart pounding. "Did that really just happen?" she whispered. "It did." Kellan's voice held wonder. "There are still good people in the world, Catherine. We just met one." They did not waste the gift Red Sky had given them. They rode hard through the night, putting distance between themselves and Silver Creek, heading northwest as he had advised. Dawn found them in wild country, rolling plains giving way to distant mountains, the landscape vast and empty and beautiful. Over the next weeks, they traveled deeper into Wyoming, keeping to remote areas, avoiding towns when possible. Winter bit hard, but they were prepared now, knew how to find shelter, how to conserve warmth. And they had each other. Catherine discovered new things about her husband every day. She learned that he sang quietly to the horses when he thought no one was listening, old trail songs in a surprisingly good voice. She learned that he was patient and kind and utterly dependable, that when he said he would do something, it got done. She learned that he made her laugh, even in the midst of hardship, with dry observations and unexpected humor. And Kellan learned about her. He discovered her stubbornness, her refusal to be treated like she was fragile just because she was a woman. He learned that she could shoot as well as most men, could ride just as hard, could work just as long. He learned that she was fiercely loyal, deeply compassionate, and stronger than she gave herself credit for. They grew closer with each passing day, the bond between them deepening from practical partnership to genuine affection to something that felt very much like love. Catherine found herself watching Kellan as they traveled, admiring the line of his shoulders, the competent way he moved, the kindness in his eyes when he looked at her. And she caught him watching her in return, with an expression that made her heart race. Their nights together became less awkward, more natural. They learned each other's bodies, what brought pleasure, what created connection. Making love became another language between them, a way of expressing feelings that were still too new and fragile to speak aloud. They reached the Big Horn Mountains in early February, nearly 2 months after fleeing Cannon City. The mountains rose before them like a fortress, massive and forbidding, but Kellan assured her there were valleys on the far side, places where settlers were beginning to establish ranches and farms. They found such a valley after a week of hard travel through mountain passes. It was beautiful in a stark winter way, a broad expanse of snow-covered land with a creek running through it, protected by mountains on 3 sides. A few scattered homesteads dotted the landscape, smoke rising from their chimneys. "What do you think?" Kellan asked, reining in beside her. Catherine looked out over the valley and felt something settle in her chest. Home. This could be home. I think it is perfect. They filed a homestead claim with the land office in the nearest town, a place called Buffalo that was barely more than a handful of buildings but growing fast. Kellan gave their names as Kellan and Catherine Quinn, late of Missouri, looking to start a ranch. No one questioned it. Out here, everyone was from somewhere else. Everyone had stories they did not tell. They spent the rest of winter in a small cabin they built themselves. Just one room with a fireplace and a loft for sleeping, but it was theirs. Kellan worked on expanding it, adding a second room while Catherine started planning their ranch. In the evenings they sat by the fire, talking about the future they would build. Cattle and horses, a proper house, maybe children someday when they were more established. Spring came late but glorious, the snow melting to reveal new grass, wildflowers dotting the hillsides. Kellan bought their first cattle, 10 head to start their herd. Catherine started a garden. Their nearest neighbors, a family named Peterson, rode over to welcome them and invite them to a barn raising. At the barn raising, Catherine met the other settlers in the valley. They were a mix of backgrounds and stories, but all united by the common goal of building something lasting in this hard land. She made friends with Emma Peterson and her daughter Jane, with Mary Chen, who ran the general store in Buffalo, with Reverend Harrison, who had relocated from Silver Creek and was building a church. Life fell into a rhythm. Hard work from dawn to dusk, building their ranch, tending their cattle, improving their land. But satisfying work, work that meant something. And through it all, Catherine and Kellan grew closer, their marriage deepening from convenience to genuine partnership to profound love. One night in late summer, as they sat on the porch of their now much expanded cabin watching the sunset paint the mountains gold, Kellan took her hand. "I love you," he said simply. "I know I should have said it before now, but I was not sure if you felt the same. If this was still just practical for you, but I need you to know. I love you, Catherine, more than I thought I could love anyone." Catherine turned to him, saw the vulnerability in his eyes, and felt her heart overflow. "I love you too," she said. "I think I have loved you since that first day when you knocked on the door of that lined shack and promised to keep me safe. You have done that and so much more. You have given me a life, a home, a future. You have given me everything." He kissed her then, sweet and deep, and Catherine knew that whatever had come before, whatever hardships they had faced, had been worth it to arrive at this moment. As summer turned to fall, Catherine realized she was pregnant. The discovery filled her with joy and terror in equal measure. She told Kellan one evening simply and directly and watched his face transform with wonder. "A baby," he said, his hand moving to rest on her still flat stomach. "We are going to have a baby." "Are you happy?" Catherine asked, suddenly nervous. "Happy," he laughed, pulled her into his arms. "Catherine, I am beyond happy. I am blessed, honored, terrified," he admitted, "but mostly just grateful, for you, for this life, for everything." The pregnancy progressed smoothly. Emma Peterson, who had delivered half the babies in the valley, checked on Catherine regularly and pronounced her healthy. Kellan became even more protective, insisting she take it easy, that he could handle the heavy ranch work. Catherine tolerated his hovering with amused patience, knowing it came from love. Their son was born on a cold March morning in 1880, coming into the world squalling and healthy. Kellan held him with shaking hands, tears running unashamedly down his face as he looked from the baby to Catherine and back. "What should we name him?" Catherine asked, exhausted but happy. Kellan thought for a moment. "Thomas, after your father, if that is all right with you." Catherine felt tears well up. "It is perfect." Little Thomas grew strong and healthy, the joy of their household. He had Kellan's blue eyes and Catherine's dark blonde hair, and he was loved beyond measure. The ranch prospered too. Their herd grew, their land improved. They added onto the house again, building a proper bedroom for Thomas, a dining room for hosting neighbors. 2 years later, a daughter joined their family. They named her Sarah, and she was as different from her brother as could be, dark-haired and serious where Thomas was fair and laughing. Catherine sometimes looked at her 2 children and marveled at how much her life had changed from that desperate flight through the snow. The years passed peacefully. Thomas grew into a sturdy boy who loved the ranch, who followed his father everywhere, learning to ride and rope and work cattle. Sarah was quieter, more thoughtful but equally capable. She had her mother's determination and her father's steady competence. In 1885, when Thomas was 5 and Sarah 3, a letter arrived from Cannon City. Catherine's hands shook as she opened it, fearing the worst, but it was not what she expected. The letter was from the new sheriff, a man named Douglas Wright. He wrote that Samuel Murdoch had died the previous year, killed in a mining accident. With his death, interest in pursuing Catherine had died as well. The charges, such as they were, had been quietly dropped. If she ever wanted to return to Colorado, she would not be arrested. Catherine read the letter twice, then handed it to Kellan without a word. He read it, then looked at her carefully. "How do you feel?" "Strange," Catherine admitted. "For years I have been looking over my shoulder, waiting for someone to recognize me, to turn me in. And now it is over, just like that. You want to go back to Cannon City?" Catherine considered the question seriously. Part of her wanted to see her father's grave, wanted to stand on the land where she grew up one more time. But only part. The larger part knew that her life was here now in this valley with this man and these children. "No," she said finally. "My home is here. With you." Kellan pulled her close, pressed a kiss to her temple. "With you," he echoed. They never did return to Colorado, though they told the children stories about their grandfather Tom Ashford, about the ranch in Cannon City, about the life that had come before. Thomas and Sarah listened with wide eyes, fascinated by the idea of their mother as a fugitive, of their father as a rescuer, of the dramatic beginning to their parents' love story. The ranch continued to grow and prosper. They built a proper ranch house, 2 stories with a wide porch, big enough for their growing family and the occasional guest. They hired hands to help with the cattle. They became respected members of the community, known for their fair dealing and hard work. In 1890, Catherine gave birth to twins, a boy and a girl they named Daniel and Grace. Kellan joked that they were making up for lost time, building the family neither of them had thought they would have. The house rang with children's laughter, with the chaos of a busy household with love. Thomas grew into a fine young man, tall and strong like his father, with his mother's quick mind and determination. At 18, he took over more of the ranch operations, allowing Kellan to slow down a bit. Sarah proved to have a gift with horses, breaking and training them with a patience, and skill that drew buyers from across the territory. The twins were still young but showed promise. Daniel with cattle and Grace with the endless curiosity that suggested she would end up far from the ranch someday. Catherine sometimes thought back to that terrified woman fleeing through the snow, certain her life was over. She thought about the cowboy who had appeared like salvation, who had promised to keep her safe and had kept that promise every day since. She thought about how close she had come to losing everything, and how grateful she was for everything she had gained on their 20th wedding anniversary. Kellan took her riding up into the mountains, to a spot overlooking their valley. They sat together on a blanket, watching their cattle graze far below, the smoke rising from their house where the children were no doubt causing some kind of chaos. "You ever regret it?" Kellan asked quietly. "How we started, the way you had to leave everything behind?" Catherine looked at him, at the man who had been her partner for 2 decades, who had given her children and a home and a life beyond anything she could have imagined. "Not for a single moment," she said. "You saved me, Kellan, in every way a person can be saved." "We saved each other," he corrected, taking her hand. "I was drifting before you, Catherine, no purpose, no roots. You gave me a reason to stop running, a reason to build instead of just survive." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, the kind of silence only possible between people who knew each other completely. Finally, Catherine spoke again. "You remember what you said that first day at the line shack?" "I said a lot of things. You said you would keep me safe. And you have, every single day through everything." She turned to face him fully. "But you have done more than that. You have made me happy. You have given me a life worth living. You have loved me." Kellan's eyes were suspiciously bright. "It has been the easiest thing I have ever done. Loving you." They kissed then, sweet and familiar and still containing that spark that had been there from the beginning. When they finally pulled apart, Catherine rested her head on his shoulder and looked out over the valley they had built together. Their children would grow and have children of their own. The ranch would continue, passed down through generations. The story of how Catherine had fled through the snow and how Kellan had followed, promising to keep her safe, would become family legend, embellished and retold around dinner tables for years to come. But the truth, the real truth, was simpler and more profound than any legend. 2 people had found each other in the worst of circumstances and had chosen, every day, to build something good together. They had chosen love over fear, hope over despair, partnership over isolation. The snow had covered Catherine's tracks as she fled, hiding her from those who pursued her. But it had also led her to Kellan, to this life, to happiness she had never imagined possible. And he had kept his promise. He had kept her safe, not just physically but emotionally, spiritually. He had given her a place to belong, a person to belong with. As the sun set over the Big Horn Mountains, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, Kellan Quinn sat beside her husband and felt perfectly, completely content. The past was behind them. The future stretched ahead, full of promise. And the present, this moment, was everything. Years continued to roll by with the steady rhythm of ranch life and family. Thomas married at 22, bringing home a sweet-natured woman named Lucy from a neighboring ranch. They built their own cabin on Quinn land and started adding to the family. Sarah eventually married a horse trader from Montana, though she insisted on keeping her training business going strong. The twins grew into capable young adults, Daniel becoming his brother's right hand with the cattle operation, while Grace, true to prediction, left for Cheyenne to become a school teacher. Kellan's hair turned silver at the temples, then more fully gray, but he remained strong and active well into his 50s. Catherine aged with grace, laugh lines deepening around her eyes from years of joy. They became grandparents, then grandparents several times over, their house a gathering place for the ever-expanding Quinn family. They never spoke of Cannon City outside of family stories. The woman who had shot Jacob Murdoch felt like someone else entirely, someone from another lifetime. Kellan Quinn was a respected rancher, a loving mother and grandmother, a pillar of the Buffalo community. No one questioned her past. No one cared. In 1905, on a warm summer evening, Kellan and Catherine celebrated their 25th wedding anniversary with a large gathering of family and friends. The whole valley seemed to turn out, people bringing food and music, children running wild through the fields. As the sun set and someone pulled out a fiddle, Kellan offered Catherine his hand. "Dance with me, Mrs. Quinn." She took his hand, let him pull her into a slow waltz. They moved together with the ease of long practice, comfortable and connected. Around them, their children and grandchildren danced, laughed, lived. This family, this legacy, all stemming from that desperate flight through the snow 25 years ago. "I would do it all again," Catherine said quietly, her head on Kellan's shoulder. "Every hard moment, every frightening decision, I would do it all again to end up here with you." Kellan pulled back enough to look at her, his blue eyes still bright despite the years. "As would I. You are my greatest adventure, Catherine, my best decision, my home." They kissed, and someone cheered, and their grandchildren made disgusted faces at the display of affection. Catherine laughed against Kellan's mouth, feeling young despite her 47 years, feeling blessed beyond measure. The party continued late into the night, but eventually people headed home, children were carried to bed, the ranch grew quiet. Kellan and Catherine sat on their porch, the same spot where they had spent countless evenings over the years, watching the stars emerge. "What do you think happens next?" Catherine asked. "We have built this ranch, raised these children. What comes after? More of the same, I hope," Kellan said. "More years together, watching our grandchildren grow, maybe even great-grandchildren if we are lucky." He took her hand. "Growing old with you, Catherine. That is what comes next, and I cannot think of anything I want more." Catherine squeezed his hand, feeling the strength still in his grip, the warmth of his skin against hers. "I love you, Kellan Quinn. Thank you for following me through that snow. Thank you for keeping me safe. Thank you for this life. Thank you for saying yes," he replied, "for trusting me, for building this with me." He raised her hand to his lips, kissed her knuckles gently. "You are the best thing that ever happened to me." They sat together as the night deepened. Two people who had found each other against impossible odds, who had built a life from nothing but determination and love. The past was settled, old wounds healed. The future was bright, full of children and grandchildren and the ongoing legacy of the Quinn Ranch. But the present, this moment, sitting beside the person you loved most in the world, knowing you were exactly where you belonged, that was everything. The wind whispered through the valley, carrying the scent of grass and cattle and home. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote called. Above, the stars wheeled in their eternal dance. And on the porch of the Quinn Ranch, Catherine and Kellan sat hand in hand, grateful for every twist of fate that had brought them together, for every choice that had led them here. The snow had covered her tracks as she fled. The cowboy had followed and said he would keep her safe. And he had for 25 years and counting. He had kept her safe, kept her loved, kept her home, and she had done the same for him. Their story, born in desperation and danger, had become something beautiful. A testament to the power of choosing love, of choosing each other, of choosing to build rather than run. It was a story they would carry with them for the rest of their days, a story their descendants would tell for generations. But more than a story, it was a life. A good life, a full life, a life well lived together. And as the night settled fully over the Big Horn Valley, as Kellan and Catherine finally rose to head inside, they did so with hearts full of gratitude for the journey that had brought them here, and for the companion they had found along the way. The door closed behind them, the lamplight glowing warm through the windows. Inside, their home waited, filled with memories and love and the promise of tomorrow. Outside, the valley slept peacefully, watching over the family that had made it home. And somewhere in the stars, perhaps Tom Ashford looked down on his daughter and smiled, knowing she had found safety and love and happiness beyond anything he could have hoped for. Knowing that the cowboy who had followed her through the snow had kept his promise every single day without fail. The story was complete, the circle closed, and it was good.